Josiah Harbert is considered the state's father of the ostrich industry or ostrich ranching, and he got that name because he operated the very first successful ostrich ranch here in our state. Hey, it's Janelle Maloney, Hottie Historian, and I am in West Phoenix or Far East Glendale. I don't know. I'm at approximately 31st Avenue and Osborne and Grand Avenue, where those two cities kind of marry here. And today we are going to be looking at what used to be the so-called first ostrich ranch established here in the state of Arizona. There's more to that story. I made another video about the actual first ranch and how it failed to launch, and so this would be the second but first effective ostrich ranch. Fair enough? All right, so let's go do a drive-by. We're looking for 40 acres of land adjoining Grand Avenue, and that way people can see the ostriches. And so I'll be pointing that out as we drive by, and then we'll get out and talk about it. To our left on the screen where these apartments are, that is where the ostriches would have been able to be seen by passerbyers. Right about 31st Avenue and Grand and Osborne. So let's head up 31st Avenue. All of this area to our right and left belongs to Josiah Harbert, and the 40 acres on our right would have contained alfalfa and ostriches. He raised them until about 96 or 97 when he retired. Though he started off with 3 ostriches in this area, he ended up selling out 97 birds to William Smith Pickrell over at the Arizona Ostrich Company, which was established on the old Indian school grounds in Central Phoenix. We're heading south on 27th Avenue, coming up to Thomas and Grand. Grand Avenue runs diagonally. When we turn right, I want you to pay attention to both sides of the street, which back in Arizona territorial history belonged to Josiah Harbert. Now, he's considered the father of Arizona's ostrich ranching industry, which is kind of a mistaken title given to him, but at the same time deserved. I will put a link to the other video that goes with this to really get into why there are other people involved in this start of the industry. So here we are getting onto Grand Avenue, and to our right would have been Harbert's personal property, and to our left was the neighborhood of Alhambra, or the, I guess, downtown point of Alhambra. Josiah Harbert came over from California and planted the first orange orchard here in the state, which is pretty cool. All right, so we're getting off of Grand Avenue, and basically what we have here is here's our landmark, folks. We're in the parking lot of the Great Alaskan Bush Company. For those of y'all who are not West Siders, we call that West Sider. I'm a West Sider. I grew up on the west side of the Phoenix Valley, and this place here was called Abco back in the day. This is where ladies dance. So now that I'm here and I know, the very first functional ostrich ranch was right here on 40 acres of property. Most of what's behind Abco is scrapyards, metal scrapyards primarily. And the Grand Canal, which we can drive by. But now that makes this story that much better. Today, the traffic on Grand Avenue is pretty busy. But back in 1888, it was a lot calmer. That is when, right here where I'm standing, we would have been able to see 3 very cool ostriches. Now, the story of getting those ostriches to this property is a little bit sad. Basically, it goes like this. Moses Clanton and Josiah Harbert partnered up in California and said, we're going to get ostriches and we're going to become millionaires with this whole feather industry. So they were preparing for that. And Josiah said, you know what? I've been living in Arizona for a while and it's more of a desert than California is. So it's going to be, obviously, better for the ostriches who are used to living in desert climate. So it was his idea to bring these ostriches from Southern California to Arizona, and he and Moses Clanton did do that. They planned to bring them to Clanton's ranch, which used to have cattle, way out past Buckeye. However, when the birds arrived via train, they arrived in the middle of July, when it was scorching temperatures, and they had to stay in downtown Phoenix and be put on display for all the locals to see these cool birds that are coming in, right? There's 13 of them, 2 adults and 11 little chicks. And after they were put on display, they were taken towards the Buckeye location in a covered wagon. On top of having the wagon covered with canvas, each bird had a canvas sack on their head as well, just to make sure that they were subdued. Now, I'm standing here today on September 3rd, and it is still a scorching 100 degrees, and I might get a sunburn. So it's been hot, 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 but I just can't even imagine making a 40-mile journey from downtown Central Phoenix all the way out past Buckeye in no air conditioning and having a sack over my head. Well, I don't know if you're a step ahead or if you just watched the other video and you know that those birds didn't arrive healthy. In fact, only 3 birds survived that journey. So Josiah Harbert and Moses Clanton's kind of deal fell apart, and Josiah paid him for the birds, and he took those 3 birds back. But he wanted to make sure that people could get a good look at them, and he had 3 birds right here, where we now have the Alaskan Bush Company. I was going to say, this is where we keep the other long-legged chicks. Isn't September supposed to be, you know, get out a spiced latte and a sweater? This is the time in other states, but here in Phoenix, it's still really hot, and we're questioning if our air conditioning still works at all. That's where we're at, September. Very early on, Josiah Harbert realized that these ostriches he had, even though it was just 3, were a huge attraction for townspeople to come out and look. Even sweating crowds of people were coming to see his ostriches. Right now, I'm standing at the, bank of the Grand Canal, which ran through a major portion of Harbert's property. And it's very possible, him having worked in the irrigation industry, that he used the Grand Canal to irrigate his fields on both sides of this property to grow alfalfa. And as we know, he ended up growing citrus. So Josiah Harbert raised his 3 ostriches for about a year before tragedy struck again. The female ostrich, the hen, decided to nibble on a piece of barbed wire. Well, that barbed wire stuck in her throat, and that was the end of her. So he was thinking, what do I do now? I can't regrow a whole new ostrich troop based on this one big dude and 1 little year-old chick, who we now know is a female. So Josiah Harbert said, you know what? I'll just keep them as pets. And maybe if she matures, who knows? Maybe they'll breed. By the way, inbreeding was probably not a big deal to the ostriches. It's probably more of a problem for the humans than the ostriches. Birds don't really care that much. But 3 years later, that little chick did mature, and she bred with her father, who has been named Oom Paul. Oom Paul has also been called the father of all Arizona ostriches, the predecessor or the progenitor of all the Arizona ostriches. That's not entirely true. We did bring in some other birds and we did make crossbreeds and stuff, so it's not all inbreeding. From those two, they ended up very quickly within the next couple of years increasing their troops to over 100 birds that could be seen from Grand Avenue, right about where we were at the Arizona Bush Company. People could stop along the road and come feed the birds with whatever they thought ostriches ate, which included nails and garbage and tin cans. Or if they were really nice and cool, they could bring some corn or alfalfa or hay, you know. So hopefully that's what they did. Josiah knew that these people were coming to visit, so he put his birds on display, but did not take advantage of the fact that he could be charging an admission. That kind of wasn't a thing yet here in Arizona history. The ostriches being raised here on Harbert's ranch were quite healthy and very large. In fact, people who had traveled around and seen ostrich ranches or ostriches around the world had made repeated comments about how very large his redneck rooster and daughter were. There's also been stories from before Josiah Harbert had his flock here in Arizona about Oom Paul. He had been witnessed carrying on his back 2 full-grown men. He was a big dude and really strong. Once over 100 had been produced here on the ranch, Oom Paul was retired and allowed to just be in a pen by himself, just old fart him, enjoying his last few days, eating alfalfa in the sun. Josiah Harbert's initial failure did not do anything to destroy his reputation here in the state. He became known, again, as the father of Arizona ostrich ranching. He was the one that continued and didn't give up even when things didn't work out so well. And he established a successful commercial ranch. And so we have him to thank for that. And the legacy that continued here in Arizona, where at some point, we ended up with 80% of the nation's entire population of ostriches, which is just incredible. All that from Oom Paul and his baby girl. All that because Josiah didn't give up. So thanks, Josiah. Fun fact, when ostriches broke loose from their handlers in 1914 and stampeded wild throughout the state, some of them got into the Grand Canal and had to be rescued out